When Rocky Maivia entered the WWF in 1996, nobody expected him to make such a huge impact the way he did. While WWF did hype him up to be a huge star of the future, it wasn't the way they expected him to be. On paper, he had everything to succeed. Athletic background at the University of Miami, third generation star, and at a young age, it seemed like he would learn a lot. While that was a rocky start for him, ironic, Maivia would prosper as a villainous egomaniac renamed The Rock. The Rock was eccentric and a far cry from who Rocky Maivia was. All of a sudden, he became one of the hottest talent in the WWF. When the Rock character began, it took him only 1 year to become the WWF champion and main event WrestleMania. WrestleMania 15 was then the most purchased event in wrestling history, and it was led by Stone Cold Steve Austin and the great one, The Rock. But the best was yet to come. Despite being a villain, Rock was cheered like crazy, and this forced the WWF to turn him into a fan favorite. Rock's charisma was unparalleled in the WWF to the point where he started making appearances on TV. These appearances were the best that a WWF wrestler had at the time and allowed for him to consider another form of entertainment. One of Rock's first major appearances was Saturday Night Live. This was a way of promoting WrestleMania 2000, and he even got to host a show at one point. This was only done by Hulk Hogan in the past, so Rock was starting to enter uncharted waters. Rock's charisma translated well to the big screens, as not too long after, Universal gave him a spot in the Mummy Returns movie. He had a small cameo that turned into a full-on spin-off movie for the great one. Rock charmed moviegoers with his short cameo and also earned praise from filmmakers for his hard-working mentality. He had a show I assume was Insurrection 2000 and flew to Marrakesh for several days before flying back to the US for the build to the Judgment Day pay-per-view. Now, Rock had a lot of upside. He was already working hard as a wrestler, so in some ways, this would be a bit easier for him. But he was entering something that was mostly foreign to pro wrestling. Over the last few years, several wrestlers such as Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper tried breaking through in the world of entertainment. Piper, of course, has an iconic role in the movie They Live. Hulk Hogan tried his best as well, but both men were stuck in B-movie land. It was always going to be easier on their bodies. After years of wear and tear, finding a place in Hollywood would allow for these wrestlers to heal properly and not worry about the structure of professional wrestling, because wrestling doesn't have any sort of SAG policy. If you're wondering what SAG policy it is, it's basically health benefits. And not to mention that actors don't really do their own stunts, unless they're Tom Cruise. The Rock found massive success with the release of his first real starring role, The Scorpion King. It was positively received and felt very comfortable in the starring role. Of course, on paper it makes sense he would, but Rock came from the world of wrestling. This only showed that his days of being a full-time wrestler were coming to an end. Why would he stay around full-time when he could come around occasionally and see the glitz and glamour that the wrestling world offers? Scorpion King was the world's first introduction to The Rock in a major movie role, and he was destined to succeed. But of course, the road to success was paved with struggles. It's easy to look and say Rock being a star isn't surprising, but he actually went through a lot. Shortly afterwards, he featured in another huge movie, The Rundown. The Rundown movie is one of my favorites of his, because while he was still a tough guy, it wasn't as cliched as it would end up being in the future. He offered a different side of comedy than his WWE fans were used to, and the screen would get brighter every time he's trading words with Sean William Scott. I like this one because while he's still a strong guy, it didn't mean he wouldn't find himself in some awkward situations. It had a nice cast of Christopher Walken, Rosario Dawson as well, and it felt like the jungle offered everything. They treated that jungle like it was prime hell in a cell. Anything goes down. Rock had positive reviews for this movie. A lot of people liked it, and while it barely broke even when it comes to the budget, it still showed that maybe things were gonna work out well for The Rock. This was followed up with a badass classic, at least for me, because I don't think it's a classic for most, Walking Tall. It was a remake of the old one, and Rock felt like a much grounded badass compared to the early 2000s action characters. Here, all he needed was a badge and a 2x4, and that was enough to ensure justice in the town. But sometimes he would push his luck. He wasn't exactly a morally grandstanding person.
Sir, get your tail lights fixed.
It's a pretty short movie with Neil McDonough, Johnny Knoxville, and you would see a bit of who The Rock would become later on in his movie roles. But from here on, for a couple of years, he really put in the work. Johnson featured in the not-needed sequel to Get Shorty starring John Travolta. The first movie is pretty good, but this one not so much. It feels like a movie that was doing too much for its own good. Rock's role though as Elliot Wilhelm was pretty hilarious. He was a highlight of the movie, playing a gay man that's a bodyguard that wants to break through into the entertainment world. They had everybody in this movie. Like, I'm just looking at this damn cast, and I think I saw my name on the list. It was so damn packed. Like, every minute a star would come out, which is obvious because it's Hollywood, whatever, but man, this cast was stacked. Apparently, Rock was asked not to play this role because it would ruin him in Hollywood, but he was committed to the movie so much that he ended up being a positive from it. Doom was next. This was a very bad movie, and one that nobody talks about for a reason. Rock himself wasn't bad at all in this film, but felt disappointed about how the whole thing went down. Doom is another one of those 2000s video game movies that didn't go well. For some reason, a lot of those kind of movies didn't succeed because they lost the essence of what made said game special, and in addition, they feel very cash grab-like. He played the main antagonist, but it's something he'd like to forget. It didn't make enough movie, and in addition, nobody liked it. Rock also featured in a video game here called Spy Hunter, if I remember correctly. The game wasn't well received, which in turn led to the planned movie being cancelled. Rock didn't have many major roles at the time. It was Gridiron Gang, which is basically Coach Carter's brother. Decent movie, but Rock was great here. What makes him great is that he understood this role very well and had a lot of passion and interest in making it a good role for him. He already has experience in the world of football. He knows how things are, so it was a bit of a passion project for him. He had the capabilities to do well in Hollywood, as evident by some of his roles up to this point, such as Be Cool and Gridiron Gang, but there's a reason why he ended up becoming who he was. Now, this sounds so random, but apparently Rock was so close to being Willy Wonka and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I just can't see this one, because to me, it's always Johnny Depp's role. There was one point where Rock decided to forego the wrestling name he had. It was a way of being taken serious in Hollywood. This was in the middle of his early days as an actor, so it was around 2006. Johnson was taking up roles early on that he wouldn't dare consider in this day and age, and these roles helped shape him up and understand that maybe he's better off being an action guy. That's what he thought. Many other people thought otherwise. Southland Tales. It's a movie that he himself still doesn't understand to this day, and that tells you all you need to know. It's a movie that saw Johnson star as Boxer Centauros, an action star who's got amnesia and is married to the potential president. I just put it simply because this movie's crazy. The movie can't be described coherently unless you watch it. It's one of those. It's a movie directed by Richard Kelly, who previously made Donnie Darko, but for certain it was Dwayne Johnson's weirdest characters he's ever played. But he was actually compelling here, especially when you see how much he's evolved and changed throughout the years. It almost feels like a movie such as this one is fake, like it's just so unusual. It's basically the world at its worst and the world is about to collapse. Boxer Centauros with The Rock is like throwing someone in a different world and seeing if they survive, and he did. But the movie was hated so much. It was rushed for Khan, and even though the hate was for the film, Johnson took it to heart. I took it in the gut. We all went into that movie having so much trust in a script that was complex and interesting. At times you're like, what the fuck is going on? Richard Kelly, who was a good friend, was so passionate about that movie. We were the movie that everyone wanted to see, but we had no business being at Khan because it was unfinished. I'm a human being. If you read 20 awesome things and one guy says you suck, you're like, wait, earlier in my career, I had a hard time beating that. It's an interesting timeline to see if this movie actually did well, because you'd be wondering how Johnson would have fared in the future. It's a question you gotta ask. He was finding his way in Hollywood, but the one thing that pushed him higher was being a family film star. Now this pushed him a bit higher, but it also typecasted him. While it's good to be a family film star, he felt like he could offer a little more than that. This started with the release of Game Plan in 2007. This was one of Johnson's biggest movies up to this point because it was promoted hard by Disney. It saw him play an arrogant football star with no real responsibility other than leading his team to success. He's a playboy, he's living the life, but then he learns that he's a father and now his entire life is transformed. I like this one. It has a charm to it with Joe Kingman, the football star, being a role I can't imagine anyone else playing. Rock fits it perfectly and he carries the movie hard. It's obviously a kid's movie, but I did watch it once and really liked it because of Dwayne Johnson. Get Smart and the other guys are two underrated roles of The Rock, especially the other guys. That one's funny to me, and it felt like they stole the show for the first 10 minutes of the movie, and in some ways wished that it was Samuel L. Jackson and Dwayne Johnson in a buddy cop movie. I would have loved it for certain. The Family Star thing was working decently, and it followed with Race to Witch Mountain, a remake of the old one, and The Tooth Fairy. Now, The Tooth Fairy is somewhat notorious for me because as a kid, it's like, this guy was the star of the Attitude Era, now he's hanging around at family homes at 2 a.m. giving out money. No wonder I thought Stone Cold was better. These roles helped him appeal to a different audience, but a storm was brewing in his career, and it would launch him into the stratosphere. Now, Dwayne Johnson had made changes in his career to readjust and focus on achieving success. He fired his agent who believed he couldn't reach the levels of Will Smith and George Clooney, and got his ex-wife Danny Garcia to become his agent, and this was an important change. She took over many aspects of management and realized that Rock wasn't doing a couple of things right. This was around the time of Tooth Fairy. For one, while it's nice to show range, Rock's team preferred for him to be a big tough guy in the rest of his movies. While now it seems tired, initially it worked out great. His first role was back to what he knew best: action. The movie was faster and it shaped up the Dwayne Johnson we know today. He got much larger in size, had the bald look, and a much needed change back to the basics. Rock was a badass here and had his real identity. This made sense for him to play this role. This was enough to kickstart his real rise to fame. Now there was a moment in time where Rock's career was transformed completely. We're about to get to it in a moment. So, he had great interest in being Jack Reacher. However, the studio didn't trust Rock's drawing ability, and this is something you never hear. It feels very insane to say that, but it opened way for the Fast and Furious series. With the 2009 release of Fast and Furious, the series experienced a resurgence and was shifting into the highest gears than ever before. Vin Diesel's return to the series was very important in readjusting the films and going with a clear direction. Tokyo Drift is wonderful for me, but when you see how things were up to the first 4 movies in the Fast and Furious series, it was mostly based around racing. One way or another, the story would be about clutching gears. Number 5 though moves a bit away from that in favor of action heists. Family was still a common theme in the movies though. Ever since the first one, it's always been about family. Dwayne Johnson played Luke Hobbs, a no-nonsense DSS agent with nothing on his mind but capturing Brian O'Connor and Dominic Toretto. Even if it means scouring halfway around the world to Brazil in a land that he wasn't familiar with, he was gonna do it. This is probably the best movie Dwayne Johnson featured in up to this point. The dialogue was great, and he presented a very intimidating future for Dom and his family. There's a difference from this character to what he would become later on. Luke Hobbs would become a bit more ridiculous as time went on, but here, it was great. He was firm and straight as an arrow when it came to this character, and his inclusion would help Fast 5 become the most successful film up to that point in the series. For The Rock, though, it made him one of the biggest characters in the series and in the world. Dwayne Johnson's popularity was at an all-time high, and this was only the beginning. He understood the method and even created a production company with his ex-wife Danny Garcia. It was called 7 Bucks Promotion. The 7 Bucks story is heard more than the JBL and Blue Meanie story, but it apparently plays a strong role in Rock's life. The production company has been involved in plenty of his movies and nets him additional money due to playing a part in these films. It's a good strategy. But Rock was on fire from 2011 to 19. Anything he touched would become a massive success. Of course, his character was mostly the same in these movies, but they were entertaining. He did have a great role in Pain and Gain as Paul Doyle, a former drug addict turned Christian. This was the most unique character he played during this run and one I really remember. It stands out easily, and this is despite being in a film with Mark Wahlberg. What makes it good is that he's just like this intimidating, strong guy, but at the same time was very weak mentally and emotionally. But back to the topic about that run. He featured in The Journey 2, G.I. Joe, Retaliation, San Andreas, Central Intelligence, Moana, Baywatch, Jumanji 2, Rampage, Skyscraper, and 4 Fast and Furious movies, with one being a spin-off they made specifically for him and Jason Statham. It's very easy to understand why Rock's in the position he's in right now. It's so simple. He had mad charisma, but now he was much larger and at times intimidating, and that's a great combination for the big screen. I will say that Pain and Gain and Central Intelligence were the 2 films he showed something different. I think those 2 are the 2 unique ones. Jumanji was actually a bit interesting. It wasn't full on The Rock as the action character. You know, it was a bit funny here, I will say, just to clarify. He did all of this while starring in an HBO show called Ballers. It's like Entourage's brother basically, but it doesn't have that same charm. And I actually watched almost all of it, but even then, I remember nothing. But there was one point where The Rock felt indestructible, because he could drop anything and people would watch. There was some downside to this, the fact that he was moving a bit crazy. He's walking into the Fast and Furious world thinking it's his world and that he could do whatever he wanted. And the fact that along with Diesel, they have a no-lose clause where they can't lose fights. Like, Rock's movies are already predictable, but they can't even show him in a defenseless state or a state of despair for even a moment. This guy lost all the time in WWE. Now when he's in Hollywood, all of a sudden he becomes Hulk Hogan. It's a bit absurd. Rock had a very squeaky clean image for years, but with the release of DC's film Black Adam, that all changed. Playing the role of a superhero in a DC or a Marvel movie is incredible, but this gift wasn't utilized to its full potential with Dwayne Johnson. The movie was bland and a huge disappointment, and funny enough, you heard stories about him being unprofessional. For years you didn't hear it until this movie released. That's how bad this movie was. The movie didn't make its money back and Rock got all emotional over it. Then there's the Maui wildfire incident where him and Oprah were telling people to donate to help stop the fires. Now, Rock did donate $5 million, but people are like, why don't you tell one of your billionaire friends to donate rather than one of the common people? He was very self-aware about the situation though, because he came under fire. He kind of realized what he did wrong there. While Rock has struggled recently with his image in films, it does seem like he's steering back in the right direction. This comes after Jungle Cruise, Black Adam, and Red 1 underperformed. It forced him to make good with the Fast and Furious guys for a return to the series and a huge sequel to Moana. That whole time period just might be a small blimp on the radar. Dwayne Johnson's still a huge name in Hollywood and internationally. Dwayne Johnson's business ventures play a huge part in his wealth and success. It's not just the movies doing well. He started a partnership with Under Armour, and to say it was a success would be an understatement. He had shirts, shoes, although I wouldn't be caught dead in one of these, and even a partnership with UFC. The UFC partnership was funny because everyone trashed them. The official shoe sponsor of UFC and the fighters don't even get paid to sponsor them. They used to promote him like crazy that if you watch on mute, it seems like the heavyweight champion is eventually gonna fight him. Rock was constantly talking about UFC being involved with it, and I'm like, bro, was he blind? He was entering the wrong ring. And for some reason, he pulled a Hulk Hogan and said he almost became a Pride fighter in 1997. You know, I'm just gonna say, if you wanna lie for 12 hours, drink Terramana. Speaking of Terramana, Rock holds a share in the tequila brand. There's no real number aware to the public, but he's making bank on it for sure. The company is valued at $3.5 billion, and that is an incredible number. We didn't mention his purchase of the XFL for $15 million. It's since merged with the United States Football League, and once again, he has a strong percentage in the merged league. And of course, we also have to mention his most recent position as that of a member of the TKO board of directors. Dwayne Johnson's got his hands on a lot of projects and industries. There's not many people in the world that are more famous than him, and I actually might have a hard time naming 100 people more famous than Dwayne Johnson. Now, I do have issues with him. The fact that it's all about image, he's scared to say or do certain things, the fact that he doesn't try to show more range in the last 10 years, but at the very least, he's not a terrorist in Hollywood. I understand the game and the fact that you have to position yourself in certain ways, because that's the entire reason why he's as successful as he is, but I do wish The Rock would show more variety. It does seem like that's happening recently. He's starring in an A24 movie as Mark Kerr, a former MMA fighter, and also as a villain in a Scorsese movie set in Hawaii. These two have to be his most interesting roles in years, and I'm glad to see that he's doing something different for once. Alright, that's Rock's career in Hollywood. I just wanted to make this video as a side one. I don't care if it gets views or not. I know it's not. Who cares? I just wanted to upload this because I thought it was an interesting concept. Talk about him in great detail. If you guys enjoyed this one, I'll definitely make one on John Cena and Dave Bautista. We'll see. I hope you enjoyed this one because I did.